welcome to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Please like, comment, subscribe, and check out the show on social media. All links to the social media are in the description below. Before we get going, we have some entries into the Raw Takes and You contest, which of course all you have to do is attach a video. We'll have the full video description of that contest here in just 1 second. But here are two of the first entries, courtesy of Kenny and Will. So let's see what they have to say.
Okay, I want to start off by talking about Ohio State in the national championship. And everyone keeps saying, oh, they spent $20 million, this, that, the other. Well, we were only third on that list. There's two people above us. Oregon spent like $600,000 more than we did, and Texas spent $22.2 million, so at least we have a championship to show for it. Also, 11 plus schools spent $15 million or more. Now, the next subject is Myles Garrett. He gave us everything that he had for the years that he was here, and I don't blame him for wanting to move on, especially if we're rebuilding again. So thank you, Myles, and hopefully, he can win a Super Bowl somewhere else. The third thing I would want to mention is the draft. Please do not draft a quarterback. I would love to see us trade back and take an offensive lineman somewhere between 8 and 12. And that's it. Thanks.
Yours truly here with a raw take for Mr. Andrew Hoty. So, raw take is going to be the Browns will be sending Myles Garrett to the Los Angeles Rams for Cooper Kupp, Jared Verse, and Braden Fisk, as well as a first-round pick. Framework of it, that might need some additional picks going back to the Rams. Not sure how the financials necessarily stack up. No, Kupp makes a little bit more. We're getting more back player-wise.
All right, great stuff, guys. Thank you very much for contributing, and you both have a chance to not only debate me on this podcast, but also to win a $50 NFL Team Shop card. Well, there you go. The Raw Takes and You contest. All the submissions will be taken until March 4th, so a little less than a month from now. And not only, if you have all the most combined likes, and this is on all social media, you could DM me your submission, and I could put it on the Hoty Raw Takes Instagram or Facebook account as well, or X, of course. But all the likes from all the platforms will be counted towards the NFL Team Shop gift card and a chance to debate me on the show. So just submit a video to me, either DM it or post it on your own. We'll count all the likes from the video on whatever platforms it's on, and whoever has the most will win that gift card, and will also win an opportunity to debate me. But I can't guarantee you're going to beat me in a sports debate. We'll have to see about that. Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Hope everyone's having a great day. Let's get right to it. The Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously, with another big win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I don't really necessarily want to talk about that because we know what the Cavaliers are. They had a tremendous game. Evan Mobley with 28 points, and it was phenomenal from start to finish. Obviously, you look at Minnesota going 0 for 16 at the beginning of that game, and the Cavs had a 30-12 first quarter run. Spectacular. The Cleveland Cavaliers, we know what they are. We know what they're doing. They're a contending team. What happened to the Minnesota Timberwolves is a huge question. This was a team contending for the NBA Finals last year, and they've absolutely fallen apart. Obviously, they lost Karl Anthony Towns, probably a big reason why that's the case. But something's going on with these Timberwolves. They do not look the same. And Anthony Edwards, we know what he can do. He put up 44 points in that loss yesterday. He's still an all-star caliber talent, a special superstar, in my opinion, who I think is going to be leading the Minnesota Timberwolves to playoff runs for years to come. But this doesn't look like a years-to-come playoff run. And granted, maybe they get the Memphis Grizzlies in round one, and it's a very competitive series. I don't think Anthony Edwards is the kind of guy that's just going to go down in a playoff series easily. But having said that, and that's just based on what the bracket lands up being now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have absolutely fallen apart. Their role players aren't even being the same role players. Is Rudy Gobert the same Rudy Gobert? Is the coaching the same as it was last year? Something's going on with the Timberwolves. This is not the Minnesota Timberwolves that were built to beat the Denver Nuggets. The Dallas Mavericks, they just caught fire at the right time. They couldn't overcome them. But now, Luka Doncic is a Los Angeles Laker, and the Lakers look like they have another weapon at their disposal as they just overtook Houston in the Western Conference, and they're climbing up the ranks along with the Denver Nuggets. So, I don't know what to say. The Minnesota Timberwolves, to me, they should not be this bad. They should be contending with those top four spots in the Western Conference. And the fact they are this bad and losing Karl Anthony Towns has done this much damage to them is honestly a big concern. So if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, I say just take a breath and figure out what the hell's going on with you guys, because this is just a mess. This is really just a mess. And I don't see the Minnesota Timberwolves even getting past the divisional round or the NBA semi-conference finals, even if they get there. I'm so used to saying divisional because of the football season, but you know what I mean. The second round of the playoffs. I don't even know if they can win a first round playoff series. I don't even know what they're going to do in the play-in. The Timberwolves do not look like the same Timberwolves we saw a year ago, and there's some major issues there. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they're definitely not the Cleveland Cavaliers of a year ago. And you look across the NBA landscape right now, and you see the teams contending. You look at the Cavaliers, you look at the Celtics, you look at the Memphis Grizzlies, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who still have the best record in the NBA. You look at the Los Angeles Lakers now adding Luka Doncic, a young superstar to complement who at one point was the best player in the world in LeBron James. So there's a lot of competition out there. Minnesota does not appear to be in that realm right now. Obviously, with Miami moving off of Jimmy Butler, they don't look like as much of a late postseason threat, and the Cavs may end up with Miami in the first round. We'll see if that takes place, but they don't look like the same team that they were before. Indiana kind of caught lightning in a bottle lately, getting a little hot. Pascal Siakam with a tremendous year. Are they going to be a tough out for anybody? It looks like they're going to match up possibly with the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks don't look as threatening as they used to, and you look at the 2021 championship team. A friend of mine sent me a meme the other day of that roster and how many players are in the G League or have had some off-the-court controversies or have been traded to other teams. That 2021 championship team is definitely light years behind the Milwaukee Bucks. And now Chris Middleton, who's been a staple for them, is a Washington Wizard. And we all know the Wizards are going nowhere very, very fast. So the landscape of the NBA right now, to me, it's the Cavs and Celtics in the East, and the Knicks really fighting hard to compete. I just don't trust Milwaukee right now. Denver's kind of picking it up, so I'm starting to buy into the Denver Nuggets stock again. The Los Angeles Lakers getting Luka Doncic. I think that move was to probably contend with the Lakers if that ends up being, the Nuggets. If the Lakers want to contend with the Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs, because it looks like that's a possible matchup as of right now, maybe a second round matchup. Who knows? And then you look at Oklahoma City. Is Luka Doncic going to be enough for LA to possibly overcome Oklahoma City if that ends up being a semi-conference final series? I think it's possible. The way it looks right now, the Lakers are on poise to play Oklahoma City. So could that move mean anything? And Oklahoma City just got Chet Holmgren back. So is that going to be the big piece for the Thunder that puts them over the top in the Western Conference? It really looks like nobody could stop them out there, except maybe if Luka Doncic is an LA Laker. And you see Austin Reeves the other day with a 45-point performance. There's a ton of role players on that LA Lakers team right now. And I still don't think their defense is going to be that efficient, and it still hasn't proven to be so. Luka in his debut, too. We got to talk about this. Only 14 points. It's still early. You're trying to get your foot in the water here. I think Luka Doncic, once he starts playing more minutes and getting out there more for the Lakers, we're going to start to see more of an impact. But to me, the Lakers right now are absolutely in the running to possibly compete for a title this year now still. I offensively, at the very least. I still think their defense is very flawed. But I just look at this NBA landscape right now. The East, I see 3 contending teams. The West, possibly 4, maybe 5. I don't really buy into Houston Rockets stock right now, although the Houston Rockets have been pretty impressive this year. So they're falling apart as of late. And when you look at the top 4 teams ahead of the Rockets, they just have more star power. The Rockets are competitive, but they don't have the star power that an Oklahoma City has, or that a Los Angeles Lakers have, or a Denver Nuggets, or a Memphis Grizzlies even. So there's a lot going on in the NBA in terms of the overall landscape of the league. And the Cavs getting another win yesterday doesn't do much for me, and we know what the Cavs are. I'm just so intrigued by how badly the Minnesota Timberwolves have fallen apart. They still have an all-time talent in Anthony Edwards, and I think in the long haul they should be just fine. But this season might be a wash for them. I mean, they literally look like the Milwaukee Bucks of the Western Conference, where they look like they could possibly win it all, and then absolutely the ceiling just comes crashing down on them. And there's no other teams in the Western Conference that I really view as bigger threats. I mean, you look at those top 4 teams, those are the threats. Golden State with Jimmy Butler, what's that going to do? Just push them into the playoffs, possibly? It may, but there's no evidence Jimmy Butler is going to be happy in Golden State. There was already reports saying he didn't want to go anywhere but Golden State. Miami just wanted to get rid of him. So what does that mean? The NBA right now, these last couple weeks of the regular season, is going to be a madhouse, though, all the way up until April. Once the postseason starts, the seeding is going to start to become for real. Are the Cavs going to be able to keep this momentum up? And the Celtics had a blowout yesterday, too. The Celtics are right on the Cavs trail. So, you look at everything going on right now in the NBA. I think seeding is going to be very, very important. And we'll take a look at the exact standings real quick, especially because I'm really fascinated by the Eastern Conference. So the Cavs, they are ahead of Boston, obviously, by 6 games now. New York is in 3rd place. So, Indiana 4, Milwaukee 5. That's the intriguing matchup, I think, there, because Indiana, to me, I still think their offense is really, really good. Detroit's in the playoffs as the season ends. They're a really well-coached team, and we see what Cade Cunningham's able to do. Give credit to J.B. Bickerstaff. It was time for him to leave Cleveland, but obviously the right coaching hire for the Detroit Pistons. Miami is in the play-in right now, but I don't really take them seriously. Atlanta, they gave the Cavs some fits earlier this year. Is that a concern? Orlando's in the middle of a late-season collapse. The Chicago Bulls, they're always a team that like makes the play-in and then loses in the play-in, so I'm not really threatened by them. And then that's your field of 10 right there in the East. You look at the West, Oklahoma City on top of it all. Memphis is about 7-8 games behind. I don't think anyone's catching up to the Thunder. Denver, obviously with Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets starting to slowly figure things out a little bit, 7-3 in their last 10. The Lakers have been hot, though. They overtook Houston already at the 4 spot, Houston at the 5. The Clippers, they're still kind of the retirement home of the NBA, one of the few. Them, Dallas, and Golden State. And then Minnesota's in the play-in at 7. Dallas is in the play-in, too. Even with Luka, Dallas didn't look like they were going far. You look at the Kings. I mean, some nice moments, sure, but, they just traded De'Aaron Fox. It's hard to take them seriously. And Golden State would make the play-in as of right now, but they're only one game above 500. And then you have the Suns and the Spurs to round up before making the playoffs. And then Portland, Utah, New Orleans, Washington, Charlotte, Toronto, all wastelands right now. Brooklyn, that's basketball purgatory, essentially. Those teams are going nowhere. So, I mean, to me right now, the NBA landscape is focused really on the top 4 teams in each of those conferences, maybe 5. I'd say 5. You look from Cleveland to Milwaukee, and in the West, you look at Oklahoma City to Houston. Those really are the teams that are probably contending for a title. I would even maybe throw Houston out there. They're still very young. The 9 teams contending possibly for a championship this year. I think a great story for the NBA maybe would be Cleveland Cavaliers versus LA Lakers in the finals. I think the Cavaliers would win that series, to be honest with you. I just think the defensive flaws of the Lakers are too much to handle when the Cavs play defense pretty efficiently, despite some up and downs as of late. But having said that, the story behind a Cavs-Lakers finals would be absolutely great for the NBA. Because it's LeBron James possibly playing in his last finals appearance against a team that drafted him, against a team that has a new look, against a team that he left, essentially. He left to be a lottery team, and they rebuilt again, and now they have a new brand, a new look, new stars. Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, an offensive machine, probably the best offensive player the Cavs have. Jared Allen, great defensive rebounder. Everything you could do with the Cavaliers, and they may have an answer for the Los Angeles Lakers, but the story behind, the Heat and the Lakers played in the finals a few years ago. The story behind a Cavs-Lakers finals would be absolutely great for the NBA. For both franchises, for the history of the league, and especially if LeBron does bow out. I still think the Cavs would be the better team in that series. But it would be an awesome story. And if the Cavaliers were to win a championship over the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James on the roster, I think that would be historic for the city of Cleveland. And I would honestly put that above the LeBron championship, honestly. I really would. But if the Lakers ended up winning it, that would also be a good story for the Los Angeles Lakers, and it would be another thing to put under LeBron James's belt. He beat both his former teams, the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers, in the finals, if that were to happen. Not saying it's gonna, but I think that would be a tremendous story for the NBA. And I think behind closed doors, it's possible the league may want that. We'll see. We'll see what takes place. But Luka Doncic still getting his foot wet in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of basketball still left to be played. April's inching closer and closer, though. These playoffs will be here before we know it. And I could see the Lakers catching up to possibly win 50 games now that they have Luka Doncic on the roster. I think the Cavs are going to win 60. But we'll see. Oklahoma City is still very threatening. You look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, the biggest threat to the Cavaliers is still the Boston Celtics. The New York Knicks may be 3. So there's a lot going on right now in terms of the NBA landscape. But that's my thoughts right now. Cavs with another win over the Timberwolves. Timberwolves absolutely collapsing. The Cavs on a roll like they have been all season long. All right, Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts is the MVP of the Super Bowl with a phenomenal performance against the Kansas City Chiefs. It was a blowout by halftime, and we need to just put the GOAT conversation to rest. And I think a lot of people in the media already are specifying that. Patrick Mahomes will never be Tom Brady. Tom Brady didn't get blown out of the Super Bowl twice. It did not happen. Even if Patrick Mahomes ends up winning 8 rings, I'm going to still remember how he got blown out by the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Super Bowls where the Kansas City Chiefs were, I think, relatively favored. Maybe not the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, but I believe they were. The Chiefs were favored in both of those Super Bowls, and they both had 2 losses on the season in both of those years. And they absolutely collapsed. Absolutely collapsed. Having said that, though, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, should you panic? The only thing I think if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan is that you just didn't get to three-peat. You just didn't get to three-peat. You have a chance to contend for a Super Bowl again next year. Who in the AFC is going to step up and finally beat this juggernaut? The only team that we've seen in the AFC that's been able to step up despite the New England Patriots with Tom Brady, I'm not even going back to that time, there's only been one team, and it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Cincinnati Bengals haven't even found their way to the playoffs the last 2 seasons. But Joe Burrow has been the Patrick Mahomes kryptonite to some degree. I think the record is now 3-2 against Mahomes all time. But that's the only team that's been able to do it. So until I see another team do it, I think if the Cincinnati Bengals retool and stay in games and are able to finally finish games defensively like they weren't able to do last year, then the Cincinnati Bengals, to me, are the team that could threaten Kansas City. I really believe that. Baltimore is still within Cincinnati's division, and so far Baltimore has been an obstacle for them. And the Baltimore Ravens, we know what happens when they play Kansas City. Lamar Jackson's only beaten the Chiefs once in his career, and the one year he did it, the Ravens didn't make the playoffs. They had a late season collapse. So I don't buy the Baltimore Ravens being able to do it. They don't do it. I don't buy the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. In the regular season, I see it all the time. I think it's important maybe the Bills lose to the regular season matchup against Kansas City. That way maybe they have it fresh in their minds to beat them in the postseason. I literally would consider that if you're the Buffalo Bills. But they've shown no evidence that they're going to be able to take on Patrick Mahomes and overcome what the Chiefs have been. They get in their heads every time. Every time they get in their heads. Nobody in the AFC, except Cincinnati, I think, is going to be able to shine a light on the Kansas City Chiefs. They're a juggernaut. So even though the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I think your dynasty is well safe, and I think you're going to still be able to build upon it next year. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to be right there again. They are. So the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, are going to be fine. They did lose the Super Bowl, though, and this conversation about who may possibly be the GOAT. Patrick Mahomes got blown out twice in the Super Bowl. It'll never be Patrick Mahomes. It's always going to be Brady. It always will be. Having said that as well, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, because let's talk about the team that did win the Super Bowl here. I know I gave a lot of things on the Chiefs there, but let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. We talk about Jalen Hurts, how well he played, how efficient he's been, and how little respect I personally believe he's been given. Very little. I think Jalen Hurts has been phenomenal at QB for the Philadelphia Eagles as a whole, but I really think in this game he showed it to light. He led both teams in rushing. He was efficient passing. He didn't throw 40 times a game. He threw 22. He used his legs to beat the KC defense, and he used his arm when he had to, and he had a great weapon at his disposal. And that weapon, Saquon Barkley, didn't necessarily rush the football a bunch of times. He was a pass catcher. And did you see that spectacular catch that Barkley bobbled a little bit? I know I talked about it on Short Take Weekend when I reacted to the Super Bowl victory for Philadelphia. But Saquon Barkley bobbled it a little bit. Cooper DeJean, it was his birthday. What a special game for him. And even though Jalen Hurts was phenomenal, and as I said, I think he's been underappreciated the last couple of years because I think Philadelphia had a late season collapse last year. But he proved to me that he is going to be a threat for a long time in the NFC. He's going to be competing with guys like Jaden Daniels and Dak Prescott and Jared Goff. He's going to be at the top of the NFC game. Philadelphia may contend for Super Bowls, and Jordan Love, didn't even mention him. I think Green Bay may bounce back next year. That's the NFC to me. Jalen Hurts so far is the best quarterback in the NFC until proven otherwise. Maybe Matthew Stafford because he also won a Super Bowl, but I think it's Jalen Hurts right now. I think he deserves a ton of credit for not just winning the Super Bowl. We need to look at how Jalen Hurts' career has panned out so far and put him up there in the upper tier of quarterbacks. And the fact that he lost in a spectacular game against Kansas City a few years ago, where Jalen Hurts made one crucial mistake in that game, but other than that, he was phenomenal. Jalen Hurts, when the lights have shined on him, has been one of the best performers in the NFL. And he's proven it time and time again. And it's been hard for anybody to stop him in the NFL, especially in the NFC. So props to Jalen Hurts. And I want to give props to Nick Sirianni. And listen, I'm not a fan of Eagles fans. I've mentioned that numerous times. But I'm a fan of the Eagles organization. They're a really good organization over the last few years especially. And Nick Sirianni deserves a ton of props. He's a Super Bowl winning coach now. And he was on the hot seat, according to many Eagles fans last year. A lot of people wanted Nick Sirianni out of town after the late season collapse. You got to be patient with a guy like that. He still had a winning record last year at 11-6, and now he just won a Super Bowl. So all the talk about Nick Sirianni being on the hot seat, and probably wasn't this year as much, but it needs to subside. It was really, really bad at a point. All the guy has done is win. He's had, one bad opening press conference, and that's it. All the guy does is win. All he does is win. Him and Dan Campbell are the only two coaches, and the two coaches everyone doubted, especially in the media. Dan Campbell and Nick Sirianni. Everyone doubted both of them. And we're all eating crow now because of it, if we did doubt them. I was a doubter in Sirianni, not as much as Campbell back in the day, but Sirianni has proven me wrong. I think everything about disliking Sirianni in any way, or possibly saying he needs to lose his job in any fashion, obviously not. He just won the Super Bowl. You need to validate that he's one of the best head coaches in the NFL. And I think for Andy Reid's legacy, what was important about this Super Bowl loss, going back to the Kansas City side of things here, I think for Andy Reid, he's at a point where he's chasing Belichick because he's had all this sustained success without Patrick Mahomes at points. But he's trying to get to 6 Super Bowl titles so he can have the resume that matches Bill Belichick. I don't necessarily know if that has subsided yet, but honestly, because of how poorly Mahomes played, I'm going to look at the top and say Andy Reid didn't put Mahomes in great situations throughout that Super Bowl. So for me, Andy Reid, as great of a head coach as he is, I'm not going to close the argument that he could be better than Bill Belichick at one point if he ends up winning 6 Super Bowls, but I think he didn't put Mahomes in any good situations. And the big thing, too, is even though Jalen Hurts was the MVP, because he was the best individual player in that game, I will say that, the best unit in that game was that Philadelphia defensive line led by Sweat. I mean, they put the heat on Mahomes. It wasn't even close. The heat was on Mahomes. They were getting in his head all game long. A buddy of mine was texting me, and he was saying, do you think when the Eagles are up 24-0 that Mahomes is going to lead the comeback right in front of Brady? I mean, literally, there was discussions about that because there was question marks about could this be officiated poorly and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to say rigged or anything like that, but there's been questions about does the NFL really want the Philadelphia Eagles to win a Super Bowl over KC? Like, there's been questions about that. And so the question marks have been, will Mahomes lead that comeback? He didn't, and Brady did lead a spectacular comeback. So there's no doubt that Tom Brady's the GOAT. Patrick Mahomes will never be that. But that defensive line that Philadelphia had together in that game, they just put the heat on Mahomes the entire time, and it wasn't even close. They got in Mahomes' head. They forced him to throw interceptions. And honestly, Kansas City's offensive line, which has typically been very, very good, they deserve scrutiny in that game. That was the worst offensive line performance I've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs under Andy Reid. And it was in the biggest moment on the biggest stage. It's unbelievable. And so that's my thoughts on the Super Bowl. Congrats to the Philadelphia Eagles organization. I know the fans are absolutely going crazy. I'm not a fan of Eagles fans. To me, they're just as bad as Cowboy fans, but that's okay. Congrats to the Philadelphia Eagles. They are a very well-run organization. And props to Jalen Hurts. He's definitely earned my respect. And Nick Sirianni deserves all the respect in the world. The defensive line was spectacular, putting that heat, not blitzing one time, I mind you, not blitzing once for Patrick Mahomes. And a lot of teams, they like to blitz for Patrick Mahomes. And it proved in that game that you don't necessarily have to do that. So congratulations to Jalen Hurts, the Philadelphia Eagles, to Saquon Barkley, to Cooper DeJean, to Nick Sirianni, to that defensive line. Unbelievable game from start to finish. And that's my thoughts on the Super Bowl. Now, before we wrap up the show, I did want to mention one thing. This is not a political show at all, but in Ohio, there has been some big news. Former Ohio State Buckeyes head coach Jim Tressel will now be the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio, appointed by Governor Mike DeWine. As I said, I do not get into politics on this show, so we're going to leave that off the table, but I thought I'd bring that up because Jim Tressel is a legacy around here. He was a stellar coach for Ohio State. I think in the state of Ohio, he has an approval rating of 100%, regardless of what political party he's been in. Everybody loves Jim Tressel in the state of Ohio, based on his legacy as a football coach at Youngstown State. a lot of phenomenal things he did there. He was an educator first, as he even mentioned in his presser yesterday. So Jim Tressel, just a huge legacy, and this is a huge story within the state of Ohio. So Jim Tressel is now the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio, so I just wanted to point that out there. Jim Tressel is absolutely a legacy here in this state. And I think the people that don't like Jim Tressel all live in Michigan. So I just thought I would point that out. Jim Tressel is now the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio, the legendary Ohio State coach. I'm not going to go into anything else political. I just wanted to point that out. This is something I think to add to Jim Tressel's legacy. How he will be built upon that will probably be based on the perception in Ohio politics. But we all know politics is a dirty game. I just thought I would throw out there that Jim Tressel, now the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio, the former Ohio State Buckeyes head coach, former Youngstown State president, and formerly of Baldwin Wallace University, which is my alumni. So that's where Jim Tressel is now, the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio, the state he loves. That's it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Hope everyone enjoyed today's edition of the show. We will be back later this week with more Raw Takes, hopefully more entries into the Raw Takes contest. Shout out to Kenny and Will for participating, and whichever video gets the most likes will get that opportunity to debate me and that $50 NFL Team Shop gift card. Hope everyone has a good day. Check out the show on social media. Go like those videos, and they'll be on Instagram in the links below. Check out my Instagram page to go like those videos as well. I might post some of them on X as well, so we'll have a good batch of them. Of course, contestants can feel free to also post it on their own merit, and we'll combine the like totals. So that's it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll be back later this week.